Today I'm going to be taking a quick first look at the recently released Devuan 3.0 codenamed Beowulf. For those that are not familiar with the Linux distribution Devuan, it is a fork of Debian. Basically, it is what I like to call a protest distro. It's where a distro is forked from another distro in protest because of some decision that the main distro made. In Devuan's case, it's a fork of Debian because Debian moved to systemd, and a lot of people have a problem with systemd, so Devuan forked it and went on with their version, basically, of Debian with the old sysv init. Although in the latest version of Devuan, I believe they are touting the fact that you do have some options. OpenRC is an option if you'd rather run that init system. They also have run it as an option for you if you want to do that. Today I'm just going to install the default main flagship edition of Devuan, which is XFCE is the desktop environment and sysv init is our init system. Now, if you go to the Devuan website and go to downloads, they offer a number of different ISOs, 5 actually. And the very first one, Desktop Live, that is the one I got. It's only 1.2 gigs in size. That is your standard XFCE, desktop environment, sysv init, all of that. They do offer some minimal installs as far as a net install. They offer a server ISO. And then for those that have bad network or no network, they do have this desktop ISO, which is 4 gigs in size, and that is good if you want to explore other desktop environments other than XFCE, but you don't have an internet connection to pull down, something like KDE, for example. That's probably the ISO you guys would want to grab. So let me go ahead and run through the installation because I've actually never done anything with Devuan before. Devuan is basically just Debian stable, and I have used Debian for many years. I'm very comfortable in Debian, but I don't know anything really about Devuan. This is actually, I think, the first time I've ever downloaded a Devuan ISO and fired it up because I've never really saw the point as far as it's basically just Debian. It's just no systemd, sysv init is back in. And I don't really mind systemd, but those of you that do, and I get some of you have real concerns with systemd, Devuan may be an option. Let's run through the install and see how this thing installs. So we do have a graphical installer, and it looks like I just need to click continue here. All right, then we're presented with this options menu here where we can choose to create a separate home partition. I'll decline that, at least in the VM here. There's no reason to do that. It would be kind of wasting space. Separate boot partition I don't need. Do we want to use a swap partition? I have 64 gigs of RAM. I wouldn't create a swap partition anyway, but it looks like they by default are going to do a swap file. I'm fine with that. I'm going to not do any kind of encryption. And then the things they have ticked on by default, use UUID and the FSTAB. Yeah, I'm cool with that. Disable automatic login to desktop, disable automatic login to console, and that's for sysv init if that's your init system, which it will be mine. And that's going to run some post installation scripts. Yeah, I'm just going to click OK on all the defaults here. All right, we have to have at least one partition ready for the installation, so it doesn't look like they have any kind of automatic partitioning tool. You actually do have to fire up gparted or fdisk or cfdisk or something like that and create your own partitions. So I will do that in gparted since it's a graphical tool. If you guys have never seen gparted in action, it's pretty easy to use. So in this VM, I've got 20 gigabytes of unused space. And if I right click on that 20 gigabyte of unallocated space and click new for new partition, I'm just going to give it all the space, which is the full 20 gigs. It's going to be my primary partition. I'm going to leave it as extend4 as far as the file system. If you guys want to change it to Btrfs, for example, you could do that. But I'm just fine with the standard extend4. And then once we do that, I'm going to click the checkbox here, apply all operations. All right, and it created our partition. The last thing you want to do, you see under the flags tab, there's nothing here. We need this to be bootable. So I'm going to right click on it and manage flags and find the boot flag, tick that on. And then that should be all we need to do there. All right, close that. And now back into the installer script that's running. Now it's asking us about partitions because we've actually created a partition now. Choose the new partition that you created, hit OK. Now it says it's going to format the partition anyway, even though we did it in Gpart. It's asking what to format it to. I'm just going to do extend 4 again. All right, proceed with the installation. Sure, why not? And then geographic area. I'm in the US, so I'm just going to click next. Time zone, and this is the US time zones. I am in the central time zone. All right, and then locales. So I need to find English US. It's ticked on by default, so I just need to click next. Next again. Keyboard, generic 105 keyboard is fine for me. English US for the keyboard layout. It's asking some other keyboard stuff. I'm just going to keep hitting next. And then, I don't know, this is the disk information from earlier. Let me close that. And in the terminal now, it's asking, do we want to proceed? Hit Y for yes. And it's actually installing everything, so this may take a few minutes. I'll pause the recording. Alright, and that portion of the installer completed, and then we get this new window that pops up. It says install the bootloader. So it says copy files, copy grub package to /target and install bootloader. You know what, I'm really glad I took the time to read this because I kind of went through the installer rather fast. Typically, when I get to a screen like this and it shows me the file system it created, I would assume it's just letting me know exactly what's going on, and I would click continue. If you click continue here, you're actually skipping installing the bootloader. You see, copy files is actually copying the grub packages to their destination, so I need to click copy files. Yeah, and then we get into the bootloader install here. We need to put the bootloader on a drive, on a disk here. Alright, it's setting up grub for us. And then we get another window popping up asking about the host name of the computer. It's going to be called Devuan, that's fine. Then we need to choose a username. I'm going to call my user DT. The real name of DT is also DT. And then do we want to use sudo for this user? Yeah, I like using sudo rather than su, so. Alright, and then we need to create a root password for the system, because we will have sudo for our user, but we will also have a root account as well. So let's create a strong and complicated password for the root account, and then create a strong and complicated password for the DT user as well. Installation has completed. You may now reboot the system. So let me detach the ISO and I will reboot. All right, and I rebooted, and this is our freshly installed Devuan. I had a grub screen, so it looks like the installation went just fine. Alright, it's asking for our user and our password. And this is XFCE. Let me get a proper screen resolution here. Since this is a VM, let me run a quick XRender here and get a full 1080p screen resolution for you guys. So my first impressions logging into Devuan for the very first time. Again, I've never used Devuan. I will say it is very much Debian-like in that it looks very dated, right? This is a very plain XFCE kind of desktop with a rather dated looking Gtk theme and panel and icons. It all looks like the way most Linux distributions looked, 15 years ago. It's got that kind of look to it. I do like the dark red wallpaper that's branded with the Devuan logo. That's a nice contrast, that dark red against the light silvery theme of the panel and all. Aesthetically, that's a nice choice, but still, it's very, very vanilla XFCE here. Now, let's go through the applications menu and see what is installed by default, because the ISO at 1.2 gigs in size is not very big, so probably not a lot was installed. So if I go to accessories, we have the application finder, the bulk rename tool, standard XFCE utilities. We have Clipman. If I click on that, we have our clipboard manager that appears in the sys tray. This is Clipman here. Clipman 1.4.3. Also under accessories, we have Mousepad, which is XFCE's plain text editor. Just a very vanilla, plain text editor. Really not much to Mousepad. We have a note-taking utility. We have our screenshot tool, sensor viewer, the XFCE task manager, which is the graphical task manager. Let's see what kind of system resources we're using. Right now, it's using about 3% of the CPU. I gave this thing 2 threads of my 24-thread Threadripper. It's taking 10% of the 4 gigs of RAM that I gave this VM. So what would that be? About 400 megs? not very much. XFCE is kind of light though. Also under accessories, we have the Thunar file manager. Thunar's okay file manager. It's not my favorite, but it's not bad either. Vim is installed by default in Devuan. Very nice. That's one of the things that kind of bugs me with the recent versions of Ubuntu is that they don't install Vim by default. VI, of course, is there. But yeah, I like having proper Vim actually installed. Xarchiver is the XFCE extractor archive utilities, so that would be for zip and tar and all that. Under accessories, we also have xfburn, which is your disk burning utility in the XFCE suite of applications. Under the development category, we have an icon browser. Under education, we have LibreOffice Math. Under graphics, not much here. LibreOffice Draw, Ristretto image viewer, just a standard image viewer, and Xsane, I believe that is for scanners. Yes, it's scanning for devices. It's not going to find any on my system. Under internet, we have our web browser, Firefox ESR. Now, for those of you that are not familiar with Firefox ESR, it's an extended support release. Basically, it's like a LTS for Firefox. And that makes sense for a distribution like Devuan. Again, very old, crusty, stable kind of distribution because it's based on Debian, which is old, crusty, stable, and they like things like Firefox ESR, you know, because if you try to roll with every new release of Firefox, I guess that could introduce some instability into the system. Also under internet, wow, actually installed the terminal email client Mutt by default. I don't think I have ever seen any Linux distribution that shipped Mutt. It's kind of a pain, too, to configure. Mutt can be challenging to configure if you've never used it before. But you installed Firefox, and here in a minute, when I get to the Office suite, I'll just go ahead and show you. The entire LibreOffice suite is here. Are you telling me you couldn't have installed Thunderbird for an email client? I mean, that's a joke. Just putting Mutt in there. Like, Mutt is an actual viable email client for most people. I use Mutt myself. I have Mutt installed on my personal machine here. But still, that I know 99.9% of desktop Linux users are going to want a proper email client like Thunderbird or maybe something like Geary. But that's weird that they put that in there. Under multimedia, we have Xfalso. Let me click on that. I'm actually not familiar with Xfalso. What is that? It looks like it's for editing the tags and paths and track numbers of your music catalog. Also under multimedia, we have the Parole Media Player. And go to about Parole 1.0.0. So this is just your standard, video player basically is what Parole is. Although you could use it to play audio as well, of course. Pavu Control is here. That's your pulse audio volume control. Quadlibet is here. Now that's interesting. Quadlibet is a nice, somewhat minimal GTK audio player. And this is Quadlibet 4.2.1. Close that out. And also xfburn again makes an appearance here in multimedia. Office, we've already discussed. The entire LibreOffice suite is here. Let's see what version they are on here. In Libreoffice Writer here, this is version 6.1.5.2. So that is not exactly the latest version because I'm on 6.4.4.2 on my Arch-based Linux distribution on my main production machine. But still, not a terribly old version of LibreOffice either. Under the other category, we have larger fonts and smaller fonts. I'm not sure what that does. They're also here on the desktop. If I click on larger fonts, yeah, it just makes the system fonts everywhere appear larger. Smaller fonts, I guess, puts it back to normal. That's weird. I'm not exactly sure why they needed that, but I'm sure they had a reason why they felt they needed to add that. Let me open up a terminal here, and let me zoom in a little bit in this terminal. If I did a uname, let's see, the kernel 4.19, of course that's the kernel that shipped with Debian 10, that's what Devuan 3.0 is based on. And if I ran a htop is not here, just standard top, I could run it, and we could verify that systemd is definitely not here because we have init here. So that's going to be sysv init running. I wonder if I could do a sudo apt install htop. Let's see if our repositories are synced and working. Yeah, and it's going to install htop just fine. And let me run htop. Yeah, and it's using 418 megs of the 4 gigs of RAM. I used it. I just wanted to verify what we saw earlier in the XFCE system monitor. Yeah, very lightweight as far as the XFCE desktop environment here. And what seems like kind of a minimal distribution, not a lot of stuff installed. Let's do a sudo apt list and then give it this flag, -- installed. And of course, it's going to spit out everything that is installed on our system here. Let me go back and run that same command. This time I'm going to pipe it through wc space -l. Let's get a line count. And 1,587 packages. That's pretty light for a Debian system. Let me exit out of that. One thing that is not light, it's rather bloated and it's kind of bugging me, this applications menu. Why does it actually have the word applications menu next to the icon? Are they afraid people are not going to know that that's the menu? I'm going to right click on the menu, go to properties and show button title. Yeah, let's get rid of that. Yeah, and we just need the button. There's no reason to put, hey, this is a menu next to what is obviously a menu icon. I'm going to right click on the desktop. I'm going to go to desktop settings. I'm going to see what kind of wallpapers they have installed. It looks like it's just the Devuan branded red wallpaper, and looks like they also have a gray wallpaper as well. The gray actually looks rather nice too. Probably I would just go with the red if I was going to stick with that GTK theme. Yeah, I think it's a nice contrast. It's a shame they don't have more wallpapers installed. Of course, I could install more wallpapers. If I get back into the terminal, let me zoom in here. For those of you that are not familiar with some of the wallpaper packs available in Debian and Debian-based distributions, you could sudo apt install GNOME-backgrounds and Mate-backgrounds for the wallpaper packs that typically come installed in the GNOME desktop environment and the Mate desktop environment. And that may take a second. Let me minimize the terminal. So now that those wallpaper packs are installed, I'm going to go back into desktop settings and see if it will find those wallpapers that we had installed. It doesn't look like it will. Let me see if I can go find them myself. They should be in user, share, backgrounds, and now we have GNOME, Mate, XFCE all in here. Let's do the GNOME wallpaper pack. So user, share, backgrounds, GNOME, open that. And now we have a much better collection of wallpapers here. You guys have, I'm sure, seen all of these before, the standard GNOME wallpaper pack. And since we have a light GTK theme, I probably need to find a dark wallpaper. Yeah, I kind of like that one there. Let me get back to the terminal here. I wonder if I could do a sudo apt install systemd, since Devuan is really touting the fact that anybody should be able to install any init system they want. Surely systemd is in the Debian repos, so no. Looks like the Devuan guys, are you really that anti-systemd that you just, I can't even install it? OpenRC is there if I wanted that. All right. Let me exit out of the terminal there. Let me get back into the menu system. I'm going to go into settings, click the settings manager. Do we have any real GTK themes installed? No, it's just the standard stuff you always see in XFCE. Most of these are rather hideous looking. Yeah, I'll probably just stick with the defaults, which is a variation of clear looks here. Icons, yeah, just the standard GNOME and Adwaita icon sets that don't look very good at all. Not exactly a sexy desktop, but that's not really what Devuan is after, and it's not what Debian Stable is after either. The point of something like Debian and Devuan is rock solid stability, right? You set it and forget it, and it should never break on you. Anyway, that was just a very quick installation and first look at Devuan 3.0 Beowulf. Again, it was just released in the last 24 hours or so. I've never actually looked at any release of Devuan before on the channel or outside of the channel. I've never actually bothered to download an ISO and take a look, so it was nice. I just wanted to see how it compared to Debian. It's basically an old school Debian install, Debian pre-systemd. I think it does serve a purpose for those that are looking for that. because there's not a lot of distributions out there these days that ship without systemd installed. Most of the ones that do are not the kind of distributions most people probably want to install, especially on a stable distribution. For example, Gentoo, of course, ships with OpenRC, but would you install Gentoo on a server or on, in like an enterprise setting or anything? No, you probably want something like Devuan in that situation, or maybe something like Slackware, which still ships with its own custom sysv init. I think distributions like Devuan are a shining example of, people often say, what happens if we all settle on one distribution or one desktop environment or one init system? That's never going to happen, right? It's never going to happen. Even though 95% of all the distributions out there ship with systemd, you're always going to have those few people that go against the grain and say, nope, not me. You guys are going left. I'm going right. Now, before I go, I need to thank a few special people. I need to thank Michael, Mitchell, Gabe, Pablo, Nate, Arch5530, Chris, Chuck, DJ, Donnie, Dylan, George, LibreQuest, Omri, Paul, Rob, Sean, Tobias, and Willie. These guys, they are the producers of this episode. They're my highest tiered patrons over on Patreon. The show is also brought to you by each and every one of these ladies and gentlemen, all these names you're seeing on the screen right now. These are all my supporters over on Patreon because this channel is sponsored by you guys, the community. If you'd like to support my work, consider doing so. You'll find DistroTube over on Patreon. Alright guys, peace.